The stolen wages issue has long been one of the key stumbling blocks in the way of reconciliation in this country. The term refers to the practice perpetrated by state and territory governments around the nation in years gone by, whereby Indigenous Australians worked for wages which they were never paid. From the late 1800s until as recently as the 1970s, Aborigines were sent out to work by the state. Their wages were supposed to go into trust funds, but over the decades that money had a disturbing habit of going missing within government accounts. 6 years ago, the New South Wales Government established the Aboriginal Trust Fund Repayment Scheme in order to set about returning unpaid money to its rightful owners. But as Stateline discovered, one of the Indigenous Australians who was a driving force behind the establishment of the scheme has now condemned it as a failure. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander viewers are warned that the following story may contain images of people who are no longer living. Nick Grimm reports.
I worked as a slave labour in this country because that's what we was, slave labour.
Marjorie Woodrow, you've battled for years to see Indigenous Australians repaid their so-called stolen wages. At this point in time, how much satisfaction have you received from the scheme put in place by the New South Wales Government?
None at all.
Why not?
I'm very disappointed that I haven't been treated with more respect than from the government.
Aboriginal elder Marjorie Woodrow doesn't move as quickly as she once did, but the feisty 84-year-old promises she has plenty of fight left in her yet.
This has to be known by everyone what's been done to us in the past, you know, and I think that it's unfair if they think that we're going to take a small amount of money for the government to put it back under the carpet. It's been under the carpet too long. Didn't have carpets on the floor when we was here.
When Stateline last caught up with Marjorie Woodrow, she was one of a number of Aboriginal women making the difficult journey back to the now notorious Parramatta Girls' Home, where they had lived and suffered as teenagers.
I felt like hanging myself in there once. If I could have tore the blanket up, I would have done it.
But life outside institutions was often no less harsh. As a teenager, Marjorie Woodrow toiled 19-hour days on a remote property near Ningan in the state's central west. There were no holidays, and her wages were kept in trust by the state government and never paid. After years battling bureaucratic inertia to see Indigenous Australians repaid their stolen wages, Marjorie Woodrow is angry that many are still waiting for justice. And I'd imagine these would be fairly detailed records. The irony for many victims making claims was that for decades government records had been poorly kept, lost, or were just plain non-existent. Marjorie Woodrow regarded herself as one of the lucky ones. Her file was brimming with information about the money she should have been earning for her work.
There's still a very long way to go before amends can be made in full.
Lawyer Vava Mawuli says thousands of other Indigenous Australians have come forward with their own stories of gross exploitation. On her books are cases like this woman's.
And this is her account of her experiences working for no wages. She says there was a lot of work to do for a child.
No one told us about wages or that we were supposed to get paid. The welfare put us out there and all we had to do was be little black slaves. I ran away from one employer where I was raped.
They didn't care what sort of condition we were in, whether we were sick or had an injury. You worked from dark in the morning to dark at night on a 7-day basis.
It says here, we worked and we worked our butts off. We were way too young to even function to do some of the tasks that were given to us.
That's right. That's a common experience with many claimants.
I reaffirm in this place, formally and solemnly as Premier, on behalf of the Government and people of New South Wales, our apology to the Aboriginal people.
In 1997, former Premier Bob Carr apologised to Indigenous Australians on behalf of his government and the people of New South Wales. But sorry wasn't enough in itself to make amends for past wrongs. In 2004, the Labor government established the Aboriginal Trust Fund Repayment Scheme. But for the claimants, their battle was not yet at an end.
I'm sorry that this has taken so long, but there is an absence of records.
When the scheme was first set up 6 years ago, it was estimated that it would cost the state up to $100 million. But so far, less than $2.5 million has been paid to claimants. Former Democrat Senator Aden Ridgway is now the chairman of the panel overseeing the scheme.
Are a lot of claimants, do they have unrealistic expectations of what they could have hoped to receive from the scheme?
Look, I think so, and I can understand why that would be the case. First of all, I think that the scheme itself has become mixed up somewhat with the stolen wages campaign and the need for compensation and justice at that national level. That's a campaign that we acknowledge and recognise. This is not a compensation scheme. What this is trying to do is to recognise that we have unpaid money sitting in trust fund accounts. We want to make sure that they're paid to the rightful people.
The state holds more than 5,500 individual trust funds. The problem for claimants was that often the money put in their trust funds in the first place was just a pittance, and even accounting for interest, the sums are still a relatively paltry amount. Aden Ridgway says the solution was to offer every claimant a flat rate.
The lump sum payment was really about trying to deal with two things. One was about bringing a sense of equity and justice to the process. The other was about speeding up the process by which claims were made, so we could look at a simpler test being applied rather than the merits-based approach, which went through all of the documentation if they existed in order to come up with some end outcome where people might only get a couple of $100 to a couple of $1,000.
But those who believe they're owed much more from the state government say they're being exploited once again.
I would be satisfied if they paid me what's owed to me. I'd be very happy with it. And at this stage, I need that money badly.
How much are we talking about?
Well, I think looking at close to $1 million, I think.
And the New South Wales government offered you $12,000?
Yep. And I'm not satisfied with that.
There's concern too that the scheme isn't doing a good enough job of processing claims. Close to 9,000 have been lodged so far and less than 400 have been finalised. With the scheme set to be closed by the state government at the end of this year, the Public Interest Advocacy Centre says time is fast running out.
The government ought to keep the scheme open and ensure that all of these claims are processed in a manner which is fair for claimants before it's shut.
Aden Ridgway says the backlog of claims is nothing to be alarmed about.
We now no longer need to go to the extent of trying to identify how much sits in an account. All we need to do is establish that an account did exist on strong and circumstantial evidence. Once we've done that, we can recommend a payment and that can be expedited immediately.
For many claimants too, old age is making memories fade and details become vague. But Marjorie Woodrow is vowing to fight on, saying she'll take legal action against the New South Wales government for what she believes she's owed.
I think that time's got to change for us to have something back to us, to give us something back in the right way that's owed to us gracefully.
Thanks, Nick Grimm.